Hello, everybody. Tommy Tables here, and we are back with another genre, guys. And this is going to be an exciting, dare I say, action-filled genre, guys. You might say no, yes, no, maybe so. Anyway, welcoming back, of course, the indefatigable Lorn and the inimitable Lou Wasserman's Ghost. I'm going to run out of these words eventually, I'm sure.
You got to pick another letter to start with.
Yeah, I really think I do. But great to see both of you guys again. And we're doing a special one today. And part of the reason for that is the unfortunate passing of Carl Weathers. So you might be familiar with Carl from mainly his work on The Predator, and I would say Rocky as well. However, he was very prolific, and if the face on the left looks a bit familiar to you, it's because he was playing Greef Karga in The Mandalorian most recently. So, unfortunately, he passed away, and that's a real loss to the community. It's a loss to all of the people who liked him. Fans.
Let me just say up front that I kind of knew him because he was on several committees that I was on with the Directors Guild. And this was one of the most sweet, gentle, thoughtful guys. Really, 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 really smart. And really, really, really a good guy. And so everything you hoped he was when you watched him work, he was. Trust me.
You get that impression from seeing interviews with him and just the way he kind of handles himself. And it's really kind of reassuring to know that wasn't just an act.
Which, by the way, there is an interview, if you go search for this on YouTube, of him on the Carson Show, talking about making Predator and about he and Arnold started this sort of competition for who was going to get up earlier in the morning and work out. It's hilarious. It's just fantastic.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, go look for that, everybody. It's easy to find. Just put Carl Weathers Tonight Show, I think, and it'll come up.
Well, all that to be said, we normally don't do the genre guys midweek, but in this particular case, we felt that it was appropriate, given how much we have appreciated all the work that Carl has done, all the movies he's been in. And so we ultimately chose to watch one of his films. And the film, which the whole point about the action did not give away, was, drumroll please,
Action Jackson.
Yes, Action Jackson. Oh, that's a really small image. I should find a bigger one. But anyway, I learned my lesson the last time, and so I'm going to leave it to, I don't know, Lou, Lorn, which one of you guys wants to give the synopsis of this film?
I'll have Lou do this one because I tend to do a lot of them, so I'll let him take it.
Okay. Well, first of all, this film came about because while Carl was doing Predator, he was talking to the producer, Joel Silver, who loved Blaxploitation movies. But this is, the 80s, not the 60s. And Joel said, well, why don't we put one together? And so they, while they're down there in Puerto Vallarta making Predator, he started to write the story and came up with the title, Action Jackson. Then they eventually got a writer and put it all together and made the movie. So this is, in a way, it's kind of a throwback to movies that were 20 years before this. And Action Jackson is a cop in Detroit who, because he had a run-in with a big automaker tycoon, got demoted back down to sergeant from lieutenant and is looking to get back. And the guy he was dealing with is Craig Nelson, who you probably all know from the TV show Coach, who is a really bad guy. And somebody is murdering representatives of the Auto Workers Union, which they, of course, invent as a different name than the real Auto Workers Union. And he knows it's got to be the bad guy, and the bad guy knows he's going to find a way to get this guy Jackson once and for all. And so it's a cop movie, it's a revenge movie, it's an action movie with lots of things blowing up and bad guys killing people and semi-naked women doing drugs, and it's it's a blaxploitation movie. What can I say? And it also stars the singer Vanity. It's interesting to note the choreography in this movie was done by Paula Abdul before she was a famous singer, although she was singing and she was trying to get into acting, and she actually auditioned for the role that Vanity eventually got, but she wound up doing the choreography. And at this same period, I met her on the set of the Tracy Ullman show where she was the choreographer, and it was the week that her first record came out. And we were on the set making the show when suddenly she got the word that, boom, she was a star. So that was kind of a moment in time.
Wow.
So you see all the 6 degrees of connection I have to this crazy movie. And then, of course, Sharon Stone is in this, again, when she was doing these kind of, can we say low movies? I mean, it was a period before she got really, really famous. And then there's some great supporting people, Bill Duke, as Jackson's superior, the captain, Robert Davi as an informant, and then all of these faces that you will recognize from all of the movies that were made since by the same producers. Edo Ross. If you look these people up, you can see who I'm talking about. But Roger Brown. It was a all-star, people who were going to go on to do a lot of work movie, even if none of them really became stars the way that Carl did, and Craig Nelson.
One other thing that I noticed is that either the casting director or perhaps the agency that they went to had to be the same folks that cast Die Hard, because there's a bunch of the villains that are all handpicked right out of Die Hard and just dropped into this movie.
Absolutely.
And Predator. I mean, I was expecting Jesse Ventura or Arnold to make a cameo in this.
And by the way, we've all been talking about how it seems like every movie we pick is long. This one isn't.
No.
This is an hour and 36 minutes.
For a weeknight.
And if you'd like, I teased to Tommy before we all got together here this evening that I have found the most wonderfully obscure piece of trivia about this movie. And it shows you a sign of the times. This movie cost the massive sum of, let me look it up so I get it exactly, $8 million to make, okay, in 1980, 86. When you go on IMDb, and by the way, one of the favorite games I like to play when I'm watching a movie is to go on IMDb and look up the backgrounds and lives of all the people who are in it, because you find weird stuff. For example, did you know that Jack Lord, Hawaii Five-0, Bookham, that he started his life as a merchant marine captain before he got into acting as a very young man?
Wow.
All kinds of interesting stuff you can learn there. Well, one of the things they do is they list where the locations were. Now, this film takes place in Detroit, and some of it was filmed in Detroit, but the rest of it was filmed around L.A., pretending to be Detroit. And the bad guy, Craig T. Nelson's character, has this huge mansion. Well, the real mansion where they shot this is in Pasadena, California. It is a 10-bedroom, 6-bath, 16,000-foot monster of a house.
Wow.
I told you how much the movie cost to make, right?
Yeah.
Guess what the estimate, if you could buy that house today, is? $12,780,000.
Sounds about right.
So the location today is worth more than the whole damn movie cost to make back then.
But not what the movie made in profit.
No,
and
it did very well.
Yeah, $65 million.
And that's another sign of the times. It made immediate, but that 65, 20 million was the gross at the theater. 45 million was VHS sales.
Oh, what's
so
VHS?
that was the days, that era, when the movie release in the theaters was basically a loss leader for the home video. That's how popular home videos were. In fact, curious little fact trivia thing about the movies, that era led to something very, very strange happening. We all know that a movie poster, that you see in the case outside your local theater advertising that film and the one that's coming next, the name for that is a one sheet in the business, and they were around forever. And they were always a certain dimension so that everybody could build the same size display box in their theater and have everything fit. Guess what? When VHS became a big deal, that dimension was changed. Why? Because a VHS box is taller and thinner than what was the standard for one sheets, and they used to have to pay an artist to rework the poster to work for the box cover. And they said, well, why should we do that? Why don't we just change the posters, since it's not the movie but the VHS that's making most of the money? And so they actually reformatted the standard one sheet size to fit the dimensions of the VHS box.
Sorry, but Lou, isn't a VHS, isn't that like some sort of disc or something? Like, sorry.
It's one of the, that's like, Paul McCartney's other band, the Beatles.
Yeah.
for all you Wings fans.
Well, this was, it's funny, while about a day or so ago, Lou, you texted us and you were kind of saying that, this movie, it's been kind of painful to watch, but at least Carl's doing really, really well in it. And I kind of agree with that sentiment. You could see Carl doing his darndest to make sure that the movie, such as it was taken seriously. And he was kind of like the shining light in this film. There were a lot of things that sort of struck out at me, just baffling things, strange things. Some things unrealistic, I have to say. For example, near the end when he's able to melt through some steel chains with a blowtorch in less than 30 seconds, jumping from 3 stories and not breaking any bones. But I would say the most unrealistic thing in this film, the one that I really had a hard time believing, was the fact that Craig T. Nelson would actually be cheating on Sharon Stone. I mean, my gosh.
Yeah, well,
just couldn't buy that
guy.
I just couldn't buy that. I'm sorry.
And he's keeping Vanity enthralled with him because in the movie she is a drug addict and he keeps supplying her with her shots.
Yeah, I know.
It turns out, sadly, that she really was. And that when she was making this movie, in fact, here's an interview from the Star Tribune. She said her actual addiction during the filming. She says, I was a real closet user when we were shooting the movie. No one knew what was going on, and I wasn't using while I was working. But as soon as we were through for the day, I was into the stuff. I really felt funny playing an addict and knowing I also was one. And maybe that helped me decide I needed treatment. And eventually, 8 years later, 1994, she had an overdose and struggled with health issues until she died in 2016. So that's kind of sad.
That is
anyway,
sad.
Not to bring us all down.
Gosh.
But yeah, I got to tell you, this is a movie that for me is hard to like, but it's interesting as a piece of movie history for a certain period in time when this kind of stuff was done with these overblown explosions and overblown. However, one of the curious things I discovered, because, hey, you finally found one. This is one I'd never really seen. So I watched it for the first time.
Okay.
And what I found out is that there is a Bollywood action, singing, dancing, crazy movie, also called Action Jackson. It has no relation to this other than the name. It's amazing. And we, I think, are going to do it as our April Fool's tribute to that particular genre. So look forward to that, everybody. And if you have a chance, that's on YouTube. It's free. And just look up Action Jackson Bollywood. It's not in English, and there are no English subtitles. It's all in Hindi, and about every 250th word is a phrase in English. Like the hero says, "No reservation, no compunction, just punishment." When he's beating up the bad guys. Anyway, it's a hoot.
Lorn, you look pained.
Well, I was just going to bring that up because I thought that you had said while you were texting us while you were watching this thing that it's not in English and it's not subtitled. So I didn't think you were serious about us really watching this.
I'm dead serious because you don't need it to know what's going on. It's crazy, so it doesn't matter what's going on. The plot is not the point. The point is you have explosions and karate and swords and killing people violently, and then they all stop and start singing and dancing.
So
I watched the trailer. It is an experience.
Oh God, it is an experience.
So members, so right now you might not be aware, but there's a bit of a civil war brewing amongst the genre guys. We are having a strong debate over what to do for the April Fool's movie. My vote, of course, is for Battlefield Earth or Spice World. However, I've been met with stiff resistance. Meanwhile, Lou is promoting Action Jackson, and Lorn, the Bollywood version, and the less said about The Fifth Element, which is one of Lorn's favorite movies, the better. So
I'm not in favor of any of this. Just for the record,
we're going to pick our favorite bad movies, and when we started talking about which movies we hated the most, that secret was out.
Yeah,
mine was, of course, Old Turkey Buzzard. But anyway,
so members, perhaps.
Meanwhile,
you may wish to chime in with some of your suggestions as to what a good April Fool's film might be. Maybe we will do like a double feature. You never know. So drop us a line, let us know your thoughts, and give us your comments down below. I'm sure there are some real clunkers out there that we haven't thought about.
But meanwhile, back at Action Jackson,
and the Hollywood Action Jackson, not the Bollywood Action Jackson. This movie was, well, it was very diverse, I guess you could say. And it was really kind of amazing seeing all the various stereotypes. Like the two Asian folks in the film were both exceptional martial artists.
Of course, because everybody Asian can do martial arts, can't they?
Right? Yeah, exactly.
The movies.
But at the same time, I have to say that it really was a diverse movie. And I mean, I know this was a blaxploitation movie in some respect, but I mean, they covered all their bases. They had a lot of representation. They had a lot of jokes related to representation as well, especially when the guy was in the bar about to get his little fellas cut off. It was.
How do you know they were little? Anyway, you know more about this than anyway.
But I would say it was surprisingly ahead of its time. But I do think that it's interesting that they chose as the heroine a woman who is a drug addict. You don't really see that too often in films, I would say, especially in films of that time. Or am I mistaken on that?
Oh, well, I mean, everything was drug, sex, and rock and roll in those days, but...
Right.
In the 80s, yeah. And one of the things that I think is unique about this movie is that Action Jackson takes a hard stand against it in the movie, which I think is good. You know, that was good for the audience to see that. It's like, hey, here's a guy who's saying, get off the smack. That's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And by the way, I just found the ad tagline when they put the movie out. Name, Jericho Jackson. Nickname, Action. Home, Detroit. Profession, cop. Education, Harvard. Law. Hobby, fighting crime. Weapon, you're looking at him. I mean, you know, they weren't really spoofing blaxploitation, but almost.
But I mean, some of the one-liners in this film were amazing. Just like you can see in my tagline, how do you like your time for a barbecue? How do you like your ribs? As the guy's getting hit with a flamethrower. Chill out as he shoots another guy with a flamethrower. And even at the end, which he's like, hey, I've gone cold turkey off of the heroin, and Jackson, you can have me on Thanksgiving. And he's like, can I have you any sooner?
Oh, well, there's a scene where two of the cops are talking about their sex lives. And one guy says, can blank Kornblau, there ain't been any blank at your pad since your mother helped you move in. They ought to call your place the House of Wax. WHACKS. So it's that kind of movie, guys. I mean, do not go looking for high art here. You know, Tommy, you said something about on our last show, which I just got to watch and is up now, about getting a bottle of booze to watch this movie. This one, this would go better with something adult beverages. Let's put it that way.
I got to jump in here and say, I'm really sorry you guys didn't like this movie as much as I do.
Well, tell us about it. Tell us why.
It was fun. It was fun.
Maybe it's one of those things where I mean, not applying to you, Lou, but you kind of had to be there. You know, this is a movie that is very representative of its era. And I'll freely admit, I'm a guy who kind of likes trashy movies, you know.
I do too.
And so
I like Waterworld.
I won't go that far, but anyway.
Tommy, you like bad movies that nobody else likes. There are bad movies that lots of people like. I think in this one, it's like, first of all, when I saw the news that Carl had died, that hit me hard. I love Carl Weathers. Everything that I have seen of this guy is that he was one of the kindest, most respected men in Hollywood.
And smart. Lorn, so smart. And I'll give you just one example, frankly, from the thing that made him a star. Anybody could have played Apollo Creed as a braggadocio, takeoff on Muhammad Ali. But he played him as a guy who knew he was playing that part for the audience. And that's a whole other dimension. And that was what made it work. That's what made it sustain.
Well, I think what's great about Apollo is that in that movie, there's a moment when his whole team is not taking Rocky seriously, and he's the guy that sees, no, this is a guy that's hungry. He's a threat. Mm-hmm. And he gets nervous about it. And the beautiful thing about Carl is in that movie is that he plays a heel, but in the middle of the fight, he really recognizes Rocky's going the distance and he's not falling down.
Right.
And there's that moment when they have respect for each other in the ring. And even though he's been playing the heel, you still like him. And that's a hard thing to do. It's hard to play a quote villain that still comes across as this is not a bad guy. He's just doing what he has to do. And the fact that they continued to use him in Rocky 2 and beyond, and they flopped that relationship to where he becomes a mentor character is just brilliant. And I don't want to go off on a Rocky tangent, but it's one of the reasons that I think the death of Carl hit so hard. I love the Rocky movies for my son because there's good lessons in there about doing hard things, facing defeat, getting back up when you've been knocked down. Those are great messages for a kid. I love him in Predator just because Predator's a great movie. When he came on to The Mandalorian, he was so electric for me in the scenes as Greef Karga that was half the fun of the episodes of The Mandalorian for me was when he popped up. And even though I was not a fan of the third season, the thought that they're going to go forward with a Mandalorian movie and Greef Karga wouldn't be in it, that's heartbreaking. And it really left me sad for several days after hearing of his passing.
And by the way, we don't know when any of you are watching this. It could be months and months from now, and it could be old news. But Gina Carano made a point of saying how supportive he was when all of the crap hit the fan for her.
I saw that. That was
he seemed to be her biggest advocate, and she respected him so much. And he took a turn behind the lens on a couple of episodes, too. He's a director as well.
Well, yeah, he's directed a lot of things. That's why I knew him through the Directors Guild. Yeah. But, and this is a guy who always wanted to do this. He saw, although he started in football, and he played professional ball first in college and then professional in the U.S. and in the Canadian League. But he saw all that as a means of getting to where he wanted to go. And I think what you said about competition and about respecting the opponent and all that, that comes out of that athletic background too.
But, you like, no matter which character he plays, you can sense the intelligence behind it. Like the I don't know what it is, the presence, like you can see that this guy is something else. Like he's next level.
He's a walking ball of charisma.
Exactly.
When I mentioned in the ad campaign that supposedly he'd been to Harvard, even though he's this cop in Detroit, you believe that with him. You believe he could hold his own there.
And he had a wonderful voice, too. He has this rich, deep voice. Whenever I think of him in The Mandalorian, I always think of the scene in the first season where Mando's decided he's going to take Grogu. He's not going to deliver him to the client, and he's trying to get out. They have their confrontation with Greef. At the end of the episode, he's finally made it to the Razor Crest, and Greef is there waiting for him. And Mando pulls on him, and he shoots him, right where he had given him the Beskar ingot. It's the old fistful of dollars, steel plate underneath the poncho trick, just in Star Wars. And I had to think, he had to have just an awful lot of fun doing that, getting to play that Western part where there's a moment where he gets to pull. And they did it again in season 3, when they're facing off against the pirates in Navarro. Mm-hmm. And he's a pretty quick draw himself. He's pretty good.
Oh, I mean, you can just see the joy he had in that entire Greef Karga role. It's like, Mando, what are you doing? Like, it gets you right through the screen. It's incredible. And you're right, Lorn. Not having him in what will likely be the coda to The Mandalorian is really gut-wrenching. Like, I wonder if they're gonna, include like a video message from him or, some sort of CGI thing. I hope not. Yeah,
I think it's just. I heard some people making the point that it's like, well, he's not integral to The Mandalorian, and no, he's not. He's a side character, but he's a side character that every time he appeared on screen, it made me happy. And I wanted to see more of him.
Yeah.
it just breaks your heart that he's not going to be there to do
Well,
it.
there's an expression in the theater, taking stage. One of the differences, of course, with theatrical stuff versus movies is in movies we choose the shots and we have close-ups and long shots and we force your attention to a certain place. But on a big proscenium stage, an actor has to, quote unquote, take stage to draw the audience's attention to him or her when the time comes. This is a man who took stage. This is a man who was such a compelling entity on the screen, even when he wasn't talking, even when he wasn't the main character, even when he was just there, that you can't ignore him. You can't pretend he's not part of it. And I think if they did some sort of CGI AI thing to put him in other things, that would absolutely be the wrong thing. And I think they would know that, because, although who knows what people know.
Don't give them too much credit.
But
now.
all I'm saying is the audience knows that he's passed, and the audience respects him and his legacy. That would be a big mistake. That would be a big mistake.
Well, going back to the film, one of the things that I also appreciated about it is the fact that, okay, so you hear the word Action Jackson and you think, okay, was this just kind of typical for the 80s? But no, it's not. And they don't take themselves too seriously. Like they play with it, right? I mean, at the beginning of the movie, they arrest that young punk. And those two cops are trying to put the fear of God into him about, oh, Action Jackson's going to destroy you. He's going to work you over. And, he was born out of like his mom was a bear or something. And then even later on during the show, when he's with Vanity, she's saying like, your name is Action. Like, what the hell? So it was kind of funny in that respect. And I mean, it also kind of made the audience feel as if they were getting in on the joke a little bit.
But when you look at the poster image of him and Vanity standing back to back, and he's got the gun, it's a James Bond pose.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's absolutely a James Bond pose.
Well, I do get the impression what I had read was that they did want to revive the blaxploitation genre, and they were kind of sort of modeling it on a modern day Shaft. I don't think they got there, but I think they wanted to. I think they were hoping this was going to be a full-on series, and it just
the plan was to do more. And then studio politics being what it is. Well, Lorimar technically made the movie, but then they sold the library to Sony, I believe it was, and it just didn't happen. It just didn't happen.
Well, I wonder. I wanted to ask about that because, again, like you, Lou, this was my first time watching this, and you get right up to the end, and it almost feels as though the director kind of said, "Oh crap, we're out of money or time. We have to wrap this up in the next 5 minutes." And you've got, the captain coming in. He's like, "All right, you're a lieutenant now, and okay, you get the girl now, and okay, we're gonna kiss now, and you're gonna go cold turkey now," and then like, boom, done.
Yeah, the one issue that I do have with the movie, like I said, I like this obviously more than you guys did, but when he's driving the car upstairs to the end, it's like, all right, now you're pushing it a bit far, but I'll go with you because I know what this is.
Well, it's interesting also that he made a movie in Germany in 1990 called Dangerous Passion. Or rather, he made this movie in America, but in Germany, they released it as Action Jackson 2, even though it had nothing to do with the original movie, just to cash in on the popularity of the original, which, like I say, is partly what that Bollywood thing is doing, because it has no relationship to this movie other than giving the guy the same character, name.
Wouldn't it have been amazing if they had
the actor is actually, his name is Ajay, AJAI, so they have all these giant neon AJs for Action Jackson all over the movie.
Wouldn't it have been amazing if they'd gotten Carl Weathers to do a cameo in that Bollywood
film? Yes, it would have been fantastic. It would have been fantastic.
Well, I don't know. I'm surprised that they actually haven't tried to remake this yet in some way, to be honest with you.
I think it's so much of its time, and I mean both the time of the 60s blaxploitation movies and of the 80s action rough edge movies, and these people in this film, the union guys that get killed and the first guy's secretary, they all show up in all of these movies. They just, as everybody gets their 4 or 5 days, their 1 week, like you said, the Asian martial arts guy who's also in Die Hard, certainly Robert Davi, who's playing frankly a very unique character for him. He always plays hard-edged guys, and this guy is a total weak, loser.
Going back to those thugs, you've got Ken Leung, who showed up in every single one of those. I think he actually got shortchanged in this. You've got the same thug who held the lobby of Nakatomi Plaza, who I always thought looked like Huey Lewis.
Right.
And Argyle even pops up in this thing briefly.
Yes.
So,
yes. Well, it's funny. Certain production companies and studios keep their family working, and I always had wished. I did a lot of work at Warner Brothers and a lot of work at Universal and some at Fox and a little bit at Paramount. Had I done more at Paramount, I would have worked 3 times as much, because Paramount kept their people working in show after show after show. And I'm talking not just actors and directors and writers, but grips and electricians. And there was kind of a family there that wasn't the same way at other studios. Each studio had its own personality. But this group, they hung together. And I think that's great. It's kind of like in the old days, a rep company. Well, like last time's show, like how Mamet kept working with Ricky Jay and with his wife and with all these people that were his pals, because, people like to work with their friends.
Is Paramount still that way? Do you know?
I don't know what Paramount's about anymore. It's so messed up now, unfortunately. But for a time there...
It's on its last legs.
Well, if people have said that about all these studios at one time or another. I remember when they literally put a padlock on the gate at 20th Century Fox for about a year and a half after Cleopatra and sold the back lot to Alcoa to build Century City. So you never know.
True enough. Well, it is nice, and it's neat to see the familiar faces. And like I said at the beginning of this talk, gosh, I almost expected, Carl Weathers to pull out the Predator mask at one point. that would have been fantastic. Like, where'd you get that from? Just a souvenir, baby.
Yeah.
Well, it's part of the reason that I like this movie, though. Again, going back to it is a product of its time. You look at the cinematography, you look at the action beats, you talk about the soundtrack, because it had a couple of full-on musical numbers in it, which is not something that you typically get in an action movie these days.
But you want to sell a song afterwards, and that's why they do it.
Everything about it screams, this is the 80s. And if you miss that era, like I do, this is one that could be fun to put on. I would put it in rotation with a bunch of your other action flicks, These kind of things, the only modern equivalent that I can think of that we have today would be the Expendables, and we can see how that franchise has faltered.
Yeah.
But
they made more of them than I thought they would after the first and the second.
They did. I loved the first two. The last two I have a problem with, but I think that you don't have those caliber of stars anymore. There's no one that could lead these style of action franchises anymore.
Come now, Lorn. Timothy Chalamet is quite accomplished.
I swear to God, Tommy. The only guy that I think might be able to credibly pull it off is Chris Hemsworth, maybe, if he wanted to do something like that. But he's fairly rooted mostly, I think, in the more comedic side. I haven't seen him do like a straight action flick.
Well, of course, now 90% of these so-called action flicks are superhero movies, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's like, okay, great, the guy can fight. Look, what would, just off the top of my head, what would Bruce Lee be doing now? Because they would say, okay, he's a great fighter, but he doesn't have X-ray eyes and anti-gravity shorts, and you know what I mean? It's like we've kind of dumbed down regular action in favor of this fantasy or science fiction action, and that's not a good thing either.
Well, another thing is that a lot of these action movies that I'm thinking of were all pro-America interventionist kind of movies.
Absolutely true.
We can't do that anymore. That's why I think if you were going to revive something like that, it would have to be in the Western genre, because at least Westerns, you still have masculinity being acceptable there as a product of its time. But if you try to do it with something that's like American foreign policy, forget about it.
Yeah.
I wonder, though, if in about 20 years, you might not get a film which is rounding up people like Chris Hemsworth, like Chris Evans, like Henry Cavill, Ben Affleck, and kind of mashing them all together into perhaps some new IP superhero Expendables, like a cape version of that or something, like an older group of Avengers in their last hurrah. That might be kind of interesting.
Well, they kind of did that for spy stuff with Red.
Right, yeah. Very
But
true.
I mean, we don't really have modern equivalents, though, of, say, an Arnold Schwarzenegger or a Sylvester Stallone or a Bruce Willis or a Chuck Norris or any of these guys. They just, there are no modern equivalents. And the ones that are still surviving, they're way up there now. It's real hard to do anything credibly with them. If you were going to pick somebody, I think you'd have to do what a lot of the action movies did, and you'd have to be looking at professional wrestling. Is there anybody there that have acting ambitions that could pull it off?
I don't know.
The Rock.
Well, he did for a while, but he's always playing The Rock, and that becomes a problem.
And then he too has moved into these super movies, and that's killed it in a way, because again, just being somebody who's living by your wits and your fists as opposed to your X-ray vision and your rocket ship with the lasers, that's disappeared. And it's a damn shame, really. It really is. And it's also why when I'm not buying the excuse, by the way, that, it's superhero fatigue is why all these movies are dying. They're dying because they're bad stories and badly told. But still, there is a certain level of, we've seen this all 100 times before by now.
Yeah.
And if the right person came along and the right story and director, maybe this could be done again. Maybe this could be done in a new way.
The thought occurred to me, the closest thing that you got to something like that was the John Wick franchise.
Yeah, there you go.
If you were going to do a modern day Death Wish, I mean, that's kind of the closest thing you're going to get to.
Yeah, I would say so. God, I just recently discovered those with the newest one, and boy, is that a ride. That is a great ride. But back to this. As I said, as a movie objectively taken out of its context, I think it's kind of a B. But in its context, it does things very, very well, and certainly all of that's about him. Let's think about this. Who else could have been in this movie and had the same impact?
Yeah.
Nobody at that time.
Well,
even other, guys who got famous for that sort of thing. I couldn't see Richard Roundtree in this movie. I couldn't see Jim Brown in this movie. It just isn't the same. This guy had a magic that it's why we're all grieving.
That was
now.
Actionable.
I'm actually going to say, you said Jim Brown. I think I could see Jim Brown doing this. That might have worked.
Maybe, but he didn't have the sense of humor on screen that Carl could summon in the same way. I mean, he was a little stiffer. He was a little harder edge.
Carl has that twinkle.
For his performances, yes, but was he like that off screen?
I don't know, but for performances is all I'm talking about, because it's about what comes across in the story, in the moment. I mean, think about the Jim Brown, which granted was very early, but that we saw in Ice Station Zebra. That's not the same kind of guy.
No, but he does have a presence, and I'm thinking he probably did have a sense of humor off screen. I'm wondering if somebody gave him that as like a note.
Well,
would he be able to bring it?
Yeah, maybe. But they tended also, him being a slightly earlier generation. Even in the Dirty Dozen, he's a guy with a chip on his shoulder. He's always a guy who's, and frankly, if you look at all the old Blaxploitation movies, it's, I'm putting it to the man. It's that whole, the uglier side of the racial issues. Carl Weathers doesn't do that stuff.
Yeah, fair enough.
Although he did, apparently, I hadn't seen it until I found the clip, but he did a joke appearance on Saturday Night Live where he said, me, I'm the black guy in Predator. And over again, it was, I'm the black guy in Predator. So, and then the soldier character that he played in the Toy Story stuff was a joke on that, too.
Combat Carl,
yeah.
Well, guys, let's talk about the one thing we liked, the one thing we didn't like. I'm going to start off. I'm going to say that something that kind of bugged me a little bit in this film, and it's completely from a subjective, personal perspective, is Craig T. Nelson. I grew up with him as coach. He was the nice mentor guy, and seeing a young coach with fake gray hair killing Sharon Stone, I don't know, it just took something out of me. I'm sorry. And I never
Yeah.
really realized it, but his voice sounds very similar to Harrison Ford's, or is that just me?
I don't know about that,
Uh,
but I agree that the problem is when you're used to mostly seeing him as that nice, slightly befuddled guy on Coach, you can't buy him being
yeah.
evil. I think that's the most weakly cast person in the movie. I will say that. But look at the guys who played. Look, Hollywood for a long time. If you're a white businessman, you're the bad guy, whether it's television or movies, and this is another one of those. So, yeah, I would say that's certainly a hole in the film.
What about the positive for you, Lou?
The positive for me is that this is an ordinary movie that the star takes to a level that isn't ordinary. Without Carl, this movie is absolutely forgettable, I think. And it's also so. Well, we got to hit all the notes. We got to have people using a lot of swear words. We got to have a lot of talk about sex. We got to have, all women are bimbos one way or another, white, black, whatever. We got to have drugs. Got to have the bustling cop house. And it's Detroit. Well, then we throw in some automobiles. The one thing this movie certainly says, if you think about how terribly the city of Detroit has degenerated since that time, it's kind of a sad story by that all by itself. But yeah, it's about him. He makes it rise to a level that the basic movie doesn't have in it.
Lauren?
So again, I'm sorry you guys didn't enjoy this as much as I do. I love these kind of movies, and I understand. Yeah, it's a B movie. It's not going to be one of your top favorite action movies, but if you put it in rotation with a bunch of other movies from its time, I think it's a lot of fun. I love Carl Weathers' performance. There's one scene that makes me laugh just because he almost gets killed by this guy driving a taxi cab.
Yes.
And he goes off chasing after it. Man, that guy can run.
Oh, God. He jumps on top of the cab and...
He does a front flip over the cab, which is amazing.
It is completely preposterous, but it's fun. And I liked it. I was laughing as I watched it. And so it makes me happy.
And I'll tell you what, that's also a power of movies that are a little, if you just read me the script, sound silly, is to make them transcend their silliness. And you remember that line when the first Superman movie came out with Chris Reeve about you will believe man can fly.
Yeah.
Well, you will believe Action Jackson, even though it's totally ridiculous and unbelievable.
It's the whole thing that his charisma buys him the currency to pay off for that scene, because you like him so much, you're willing to give it to him. It's like, you know what? Yeah. I know this isn't right. I know you couldn't do this, but gosh darn it, I like you.
So, this is a Saturday Night Late Show movie.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, when you got the munchies,
Exactly. This is not a prestige motion picture. This is never going to be Lawrence of Arabia or even Casablanca, but it's for what it is. As a tribute to the predecessors from 20 years before, and as an example of the classic textbook action movies of this period, sex, drugs, rock and roll, whatever. It works. It works on its own terms. Yeah. I'm just saying, on my terms, looking back, it's a curiosity. It's a piece of movie history. It's a tribute to the actor. But as an entertainment, I don't know.
I also want to push back just a little bit on the casting of Craig T. Nelson for two reasons. One is I never imagined Craig T. Nelson doing any kind of martial arts in a movie. And so that was a shocking surprise. Secondly, that scene where he kills Sharon Stone. First of all, I had forgotten that Sharon Stone wasn't really a star yet. No. And when he killed her, I was genuinely shocked. When it happened in the movie, it's like, well, wait a minute. she can't be dead yet. She's Sharon Stone. And then it clicked for me. It's like, but she wasn't yet. And I really hate Craig T. Nelson now. So,
well, and maybe, that's part of it too. I mean, she's in that same period as with Arnold, with Get Your Ass to Mars.
Yeah. But the point I'm trying to make is that it's totally against what you expect for type from Craig. But that was what really made me hate him as the villain. It's like before that, it's like, all right, you're a generic corporate guy, but you just shot Sharon Stone.
Yeah.
And by the way, when you said what you expect from him because you know where he got to, it's more interesting that he went from this to winding up being everybody's favorite coach.
Yep.
Well,
I mean, it's like, how dare they make him likable? He killed Sharon Stone,
I still can't buy that he would cheat on Sharon Stone. I'm sorry. It's just that's not a thing.
Well, it wasn't a question of merit between her and anybody else. It was a question of he cheats on everybody over everything.
I know. I'm just being facetious.
I mean, he even talks about killing his own son at a certain point. I mean, this is a guy who's just a bad dude.
And he killed his first wife, too.
But as to the thing that I don't like about the movie, I think I'd have to do the ending. It lost me a little bit at the end action scene. But I think that you're absolutely right about it, Tommy, about why that is. It feels like they just had to end it, and so they came up with the most bananas thing they could think of, and that's what they did. So
it was.
Well, guys,
it was a charming movie. Now, in its time, in its context, it did well because, hey, people liked him and people liked not having to think too hard. Let's put it that way, okay?
I mean, I would watch it again with a glass of scotch, maybe. But I mean, I didn't hate it, Lorn.
I'm talking to you now with a glass of scotch. So, really good scotch, too, by the way.
All that to be said, Carl Weathers, what a guy. And, his works will go on, and not a lot of people can say that. So
here's a great quote. I found an interview with him, and he's talking about coming up through the ranks, so to speak. And he says, I played an extra on stage in a scene that Robert Redford did in a movie called The Candidate. That would be a good movie for us to do sometime, too, by the way.
A good candidate, perhaps?
The Candidate, yeah.
Yeah,
I remember that day because I was a theater major, and I wanted to be a professional actor. It was shot at a Grand Theater in Oakland, and I remember at the end of the day saying, never again, because I wanted to be Robert Redford. I wanted to be a principal, not some guy standing out in an audience. So he says, I think that was actually first, and then Magnum Force was after that, because in Magnum Force I actually had lines, which never wound up being on camera, but I did have lines, and I was paid as a SAG actor, not an extra. Wow, that's funny recalling that. And he grew up loving movies. He said, I worked on a lot of episodic television, a lot of Quinn Martin shows. And I mean, God, I worked on Kung Fu and Starsky and Hutch and you name it, and ended up on Del Vecchio and SWAT and Switch. And God, it went on and on, those titles, $6 Million Man. And so, we think of him as Rocky, but he had a lot of experience that led to that. And I think this is part of the experience of after that also works.
Yeah.
Well, guys, on that note, rest in peace, Carl Weathers. You were a legend. And
deserved it, unlike a lot of people who are just, a legend in their own mind.
That's true. Guys, thank you so much for joining. Well, thank you so much for taking the time on this special edition of the Genre Guys. Audience members, let us know your thoughts down below. What are some of your favorite Carl Weathers movies? Did you ever interact with him? Give us your comments. We love to read them. We love to see them. And also,
because I'm a shameless tease, I will give the audience one hint, and we'll see who's smart out there and who isn't about what our next epic is going to be. Ready, everybody? Are you ready? Are you ready?
All right.
Broadsword calling Danny Boy. And I'll just leave it at that.
And on that note, we will bid you all adieu. Have a great night wherever you may be.
Thanks, guys.
We hope you enjoyed that special presentation of The Genre Guys here on 23PO. Be sure to subscribe to this channel for more content like it. And if you want to enjoy every episode of The Genre Guys as soon as they are released, be sure to become a member at WW Pro's YouTube channel. What were your thoughts on this amazing film? Let Let us know in the comments below, and thank you so much for watching. T3PO. Please comment, like, and share this video, and don't forget to subscribe to That Park Place Podcasts Online, your source for exclusive content and highlights from WDW Pro, The Pro Show, and That Park Place for all the news that should be fun.